Hey everybody, Off the Mic Sports Network here, another edition of Off the Top Rope. So coming out of Revolution, we all knew that it was a great show, but the wrong match main evented. So what AEW did on Wednesday, March the 19th, Dynamite, is an example of trying to listen to your audience and still not getting the point. Because Tony Khan just is incapable of listening, or thinks he knows what he's doing, and just kind of just throwing darts at the dartboard and hoping that it works. Because first of all, the World Heavyweight Championship match, the street fight, I've talked about it extensively with all the crazy shit and the unnecessary and reckless nature that went into the stuff that happened, aside from the fact that you've got a 50-year-old Adam Copeland, a John Moxley doing shit that he shouldn't be doing. Like, it's just, I've talked about it extensively here. But if you're going to do a world championship match, like, I understand why it main evented the pay-per-view. It's like, okay, they wanted a world championship match. But we all know, based off of what happened on that show, it shouldn't have been the main event. Tony Storm and Mariah May should have been the main event of that show. So what they did 10 days later is, on this random episode of Dynamite in a little arena in Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of a blizzard, where John Moxley's having to drive 11 hours to get there. People are having travel issues all over the place. It's freezing fucking cold in Omaha. So they do this world title match, and they put it in the middle of the show. In the middle of the show, with the street fight stipulation. Yes, there's a gross spot that happened in that. We talked about it. But then you compound it, and listen, I'm all for women getting opportunities, but when you have a world championship match, like with what they built up, and you just throw a random women's match between Megan Bayne and Chris Statlander in the main event with no stakes whatsoever, it's not a number one contender match, and Tony Storm is just out there. Granted, the angle at the end with Tony Storm and Megan Bayne brawling with each other and setting up a match at the pay-per-view, I'm sorry, that shouldn't have main evented the show. And the reason why I say that I have a huge problem with this is Tony Khan just does not listen to his audience. He just does not listen. Either he thinks he's better than everybody else, or he's just above it all. And this was like a cheap way to, like, basically say, hey, I'm giving you what you want. Here's how it looks. And this is not what the fans wanted. The fans wanted a warranted storyline for a championship to main event with women to main event the pay-per-view. That did not happen, and we had one of the worst main events in maybe not just in AEW pay-per-view history, maybe just in general in pay-per-view history. It was bad, and then the Christian stuff didn't need to happen. You could have very easily had a similar type match in the middle of the show, or you could have done what you did on Wednesday night in the middle of the show, maybe not done as many extreme matches, and then have Tony Storm and Mariah May main event the show. And then you don't have to do this match with Cope and John Moxley on Dynamite 10 days later, just to double down to try and get out of this, which, again, I've said, most unnecessary match ever, aside from the spots and everything. We already had a finish. Like, nobody liked this match. Why did you need to do this? To also, by the way, Adam Copeland still didn't lose clean. He just got choked out. So great way to protect your character there. But then you compound it by just throwing a non-title women's match into the main event of this show that, doesn't take this thing anywhere. It doesn't really, like, it's Tony Khan trying to think that he's trying to outthink the room and think that he's better than everybody else and say, oh yeah, I totally listen to my audience. Listen, if you really listen to your audience, John Moxley would not be the world champion right now. He would not. I'm not saying that Cope should have, but you could have done just about anything to make things make sense. That wasn't John Moxley retaining the championship. So then you do the match again, even though you have another number one contender already determined. Don't even bother to do that. Do a bunch of stupid shit to compound it. And then the world championship doesn't even main event the show. You could have easily done this at the pay-per-view because it was the right thing to do. But you did the wrong thing. So then 10 days later, you try to correct it and, act like you know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. And it's the latest example of just me saying what I've been saying on this channel for months. This company does not care about its own fans. They don't. Because, like I said, if they really cared, they would have, they wouldn't have overcorrected this situation by doing the same match 10 days later and then not putting it in the main event. First of all, it shouldn't have happened. Second of all, it should have been in the main event of this show if you were going to do it and you did do it. And then some of the stuff that was okay with it, I've talked about it here on this channel, shouldn't have happened at all either. And then, like, I feel bad almost for Megan Bang and Chris Statlander because they're going out there in the main event doing just a match with really no heat to it. No, in the main event, what's supposed to be the climax and the biggest point of your show, and we knew Megan Bayne was winning. We knew that it was going to set up the match at the pay-per-view between Toni Storm. And, granted, it was a little bit helped by the fact that Toni Storm is just such an unbelievable star and a breath of fresh air and was just trying to break Taz and Shivani and Excalibur on commentary, which was kind of entertaining. But in some ways, that almost kind of took away from what was the main event of this show. And you got to have something important. And when it's on the same show as a world championship match, it shows that Tony Khan just doesn't know what he's doing. And I think he's just trying to basically say, yeah, I do listen to my audience. It's like, well, everybody was telling you that the John Moxley Cope thing was a bad idea. Yeah, you did it in the main event, and then you did it 10 days later with another stipulation attached to it, and it was probably just as bad as, what the initial match was. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll have more here on the channel. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.